The auditorium fell silent as Commander Vexith walked to the center of the stage. His blue-gray skin seemed to shimmer under the harsh lights, and his forearms moved in the traditional gesture of greeting. The young cadets before him were the finest of the Kalith Military Academy, proud and eager. They whispered among themselves, wondering why a decorated war hero would waste time teaching a class about humans. Vexith activated the holographic display. An image of a human appeared, rotating slowly. The cadets leaned forward, studying the creature. Some of them laughed. It was easy to see why. The human stood on only 2 legs, had only 2 arms, and possessed no natural weapons. No claws, no armored skin, no venomous glands. Its bones were light and fragile. It could not regenerate lost limbs. It had no enhanced senses to speak of. This, Vexith said quietly, is the most dangerous warrior species in the known galaxy. The laughter grew louder. One cadet, a young male named Threxis, stood up. Commander, with respect, how can such a weak creature be dangerous? I could break one in half with my lower arms alone. Vexith's eyes, all 3 of them, fixed on the young cadet. Sit down, Threxis, and I will tell you about the day I learned to fear humans. The room grew quiet again. Vexith had 4 medals for valor on his chest, and a scar that ran from his primary shoulder to his mid-torso. When he spoke of fear, people listened. 15 years ago, I was stationed at Orbital Platform 7. It was a joint operation, Kalith and human forces working together. We did not trust them then. We thought of them as we think of children, fragile things that needed our protection. Vexith paused. We were fools. The hologram changed, showing a space station orbiting a green planet. The Scraith attacked without warning, 12 of their warships against our 3 defenders. They breached the station within the first hour. We followed standard doctrine. We fell back to defensible positions, we prepared to evacuate, and we accepted that the station would be lost. The humans refused to retreat. Another image appeared, a human male in combat armor, his face covered in blood and dirt. This is Jake Morrison. He was a corporal in the Human Marine Corps, 24 years old. When the Scraith broke through on level 9, Morrison's squad was cut off from the main force. His commanding officer ordered them to fight their way to the evacuation point. Morrison said no. Threxis spoke up again. He disobeyed orders? He made a tactical decision, Vexith corrected. Morrison saw that if the Scraith controlled level 9, they would have a direct path to the reactor core. If they took that, the entire station would explode. Morrison and 5 other humans decided to hold level 9 until reinforcements could arrive. Vexith tapped a control, and combat footage began to play. The cadets watched as Morrison and his squad set up a defensive position in a narrow corridor. The Scraith came in waves, their chittering bodies filling the hallway. The humans opened fire. They held for 72 hours, Vexith said softly. No food, no sleep. When their ammunition ran low, they used Scraith weapons. When those failed, they used knives and tools. Morrison fought the last 6 hours with a broken arm. The cadets stared at the screen. They watched Morrison swing a metal pipe with his broken arm. Using it like a club, they saw him collapse against a wall, only to drag himself back up when another wave attacked. How did he survive with a broken arm? A female cadet asked. The pain should have rendered him unconscious. Humans have a chemical called adrenaline, Vexith explained. When they face danger, their bodies flood with it. It makes them stronger, faster, and it blocks pain. They can override their body's natural limits. A human on adrenaline will keep fighting with injuries that would kill most species. The footage continued. Morrison and his squad grew smaller in number. 5 became 4, then 3, but the Scraith bodies piled higher. The humans adapted to each attack, learned the enemy patterns, and changed their tactics. When the Scraith tried to flank them through the ventilation shafts, the humans flooded those shafts with fire. When the Scraith brought in armored units, the humans targeted the joints in their natural carapaces. Reinforcements arrived on the 3rd day, Vexith said. Morrison and 1 other human were still alive. They had killed over 400 Scraith. The station was saved. The hologram froze on Morrison's face. His eyes were hollow, his face was pale, but he was standing, still holding his weapon, still ready to fight. I was part of the reinforcement team, Vexith continued. I found Morrison standing over his last surviving squad mate, a female named Lisa Chang. She had been wounded hours earlier, could not walk, could not fight. Morrison had defended her position alone for the final 3 hours. When I reached him, he pointed his weapon at me. He did not recognize friend from foe anymore. He was beyond exhaustion, beyond reason. He was pure survival instinct. Vexith's voice grew softer. I had to speak to him for several minutes before he understood I was there to help. When he finally lowered his weapon, he collapsed. But not before he made me promise that Lisa would get medical attention first. Even in that state, barely conscious, he was thinking of his fellow soldier. The commander turned off the hologram. That was my first lesson about humans. They do not know when they are beaten. Their bodies will fail before their minds accept defeat. They will fight beyond the point where any logical species would surrender, and they will do it not for glory or honor, but for the person standing next to them. Threxus raised his hand again. But Commander, surely this was an exceptional case. One unusually strong human. Vexith's mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. That is what I thought at first. I told myself that Morrison was special, that most humans were not like him. Then I served with humans for 5 more years. I fought beside them in 7 major conflicts and dozens of small ones. And I learned something terrifying. He paused, letting the silence stretch. Morrison was not exceptional. He was average. Every human soldier I met had that same capacity for endurance. Every single one would fight beyond their limits if given a reason. They are all like that. The cadets shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The laughter from earlier was gone. You look at humans and see weakness, Vexith said. You see their fragile bodies and short lifespans. You see their lack of natural weapons, but you are looking at the wrong things. Humans did not evolve to be the strongest or the fastest. They evolved to outlast everything else. On their homeworld, they hunted by chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They did not need to be fast. They just needed to never stop. He walked closer to the front row of cadets. That is what they bring to warfare. They never stop. They will lose 100 battles if it means winning the war. They will sacrifice today for victory tomorrow. And they will do it with a smile on their face because they believe absolutely in their cause. Vexith returned to the center of the stage. I saw the casualty reports after the Orbital Platform 7 incident. We lost 43 Kalith warriors. The humans lost 38 soldiers out of their 40-person unit. By any standard, it was a devastating defeat for them. But when I visited Morrison in the medical bay, do you know what he said to me? The cadets waited. He said, "We held the line, Commander. That's all that matters." He was proud. He had lost almost everyone he served with. He had nearly died himself, and he was proud. Because they had accomplished their mission. Because they had saved the station. Vexith tapped his chest where a small medal hung beside his Kalith decorations. 'Twas human-made, a simple bronze star. Morrison gave me this before he left the station. He said it was for fighting beside him. I tried to refuse it. I told him I had only arrived at the end, that I had done nothing to deserve it. He told me that anyone who fights beside humans is part of their pack, and the pack takes care of each other. The commander looked at each cadet in turn. That was just one human holding one corridor. Tomorrow I will tell you what happens when humans fight in groups, when they coordinate, when they plan together, when they become a pack. The lights in the auditorium began to brighten, signaling the end of the class, but no one moved. Dismissed, Vexith said. The cadets filed out slowly, quietly. No one laughed now. They had come to learn about a weak species. They were leaving with the first seeds of fear. Commander Vexith stood before the cadets again. The room was fuller today. Word had spread about yesterday's lecture, and several senior officers sat in the back rows. The young Kalith warriors looked different now. Less confident, more attentive. They were learning. Yesterday I told you about one human. Vexith began. Today I will tell you about what happens when humans work together. The hologram activated, showing a small military outpost on a barren moon. This is Outpost Zareth. 5 years ago, it was a joint operation mining facility. 50 Kalith workers, 30 human military personnel, and me. I was the Kalith military liaison. He paused. It was supposed to be a quiet assignment. The image changed to show insectoid creatures, each one the size of a small vehicle. Their mandibles dripped with venom, and their carapaces looked thick enough to stop bullets. The Screeth found us. Intelligence said there were no Screeth hives within 50 light-years. Intelligence was wrong. Vexith's 3 eyes narrowed at the memory. They came at dawn. 2,000 Screeth warriors against our 80 defenders. Standard Kalith doctrine was clear. Evacuate immediately. The outpost was not worth defending. We could not win. I gave the evacuation order, Vexith continued. The Kalith personnel began moving to the transport ships. The humans did not move. A new image appeared. A human female with short dark hair and lieutenant bars on her collar. This is Lieutenant Kate Sullivan. She was the ranking human officer. When I told her to evacuate, she looked at me and said, "Commander, we have wounded who cannot be moved." "We stay." Threxus, the cadet from yesterday, spoke up. "That is illogical. Better to lose a few wounded than lose everyone." "That is what I said," Vexith replied. Kate Sullivan smiled at me. She actually smiled. Then she said, "We don't leave people behind." It's not complicated. The hologram showed the outpost from above. The cadets could see the Scraith forces surrounding the facility like a dark tide. Kate Sullivan ordered her 30 soldiers to defensive positions. She asked me if any Kalith would volunteer to stay. 20 of my people stepped forward. I was one of them. Vexith walked to the edge of the stage. I will never forget the next 6 hours. It was the most educational experience of my military career. The scene changed to show the interior of the outpost. Kate Sullivan gathered us in the command center. She had a map of the facility displayed. The humans immediately began talking, all of them at once. They interrupted each other, argued, gestured wildly. It looked like chaos. I asked Kate if she was going to establish a command structure. She said, "I already did. Everyone here is smart enough to have ideas. I'm smart enough to listen." That was when I realized humans do not command the same way we do. They cooperate. The hologram showed a human male with demolition gear. This is Corporal Danny Hart. He was an explosives expert. Danny looked at the map for 30 seconds and said, "I can rig the mining charges to create choke points here, here, and here." Kate said, "Do it." No lengthy planning session. No formal proposal. Just trust and action. Another human appeared, a young woman with medical insignia. Private Lisa Chang. Yes, the same Lisa from yesterday's story. She had recovered and been reassigned. Lisa said, "I'll set up a triage center in the underground storage. It has the thickest walls." Kate nodded and Lisa left. Vexith continued introducing the humans. Sergeant Alex Price, who would lead the frontline defense. Private Tony Walsh, who would coordinate communications. Each human knew their role without being told. They organized themselves like a living organism, each part working independently but toward the same goal. The Scraith attacked at noon, Vexith said. They came in their first wave, 300 strong. Danny Hart's explosives funneled them into narrow corridors. Alex Price's team was waiting. The combat footage played. The cadets watched as humans fired in coordinated patterns, each soldier covering specific angles. When one human's weapon overheated, another immediately filled the gap. They moved like a dance, perfectly synchronized without any visible signals. "I fought on the left flank," Vexith said. "I am a trained warrior with 12 years of experience, but I could barely keep up with the humans beside me. They moved faster than they should have been able to. That adrenaline I mentioned yesterday, they were all running on it. Their pupils were dilated, their breathing was controlled, and they were smiling." Threxus looked confused. "Smiling?" "Humans smile when they fight," Vexith explained. "It is not joy. It is something else. A baring of teeth. A challenge. It means a come and try me." The Scraith did not understand it, but it terrified them. The battle continued on the hologram. The first wave broke against the human defense. Then the second wave came. Then the third. The humans never stopped moving, never stopped adapting. When the Scraith tried to climb over the barricades, Danny Hart collapsed a corridor on them. When the Scraith attempted to flank through the air vents, Tony Walsh flooded those vents with fire suppression foam that hardened into concrete. By the 4th hour, "We had killed over 600 Scraith," Vexith said. "We had lost 3 Kalith and 2 humans. The odds were improving, but we were running low on ammunition." Kate Sullivan called a meeting. It lasted 2 minutes. The hologram showed Kate pointing at a section of the outpost. She said, "We make them think we're weak. We let them break through on the east side. Then we hit them from behind." Alex Price laughed and said, "A trap." "I love it." Vexith's mandibles clicked. They set a trap for the Scraith. They deliberately weakened the east defenses. They left obvious gaps. The Scraith took the bait and poured through. 200 Scraith entered the east wing thinking they had won. Danny Hart had rigged the entire east wing with explosives. The hologram flashed white. When the image cleared, the east wing was gone. So were the 200 Scraith inside it. Tactical deception, Vexith said. Humans are masters of it. They do not just fight. They think. They predict what the enemy will do and they plan 3 steps ahead. The battle reached its climax. The Skreth, enraged by the losses, sent their final wave. 800 warriors, including their largest and most dangerous units. They crashed against the human lines like a tsunami. That was when I saw something that still haunts me, Vexith said quietly. The Skreth broke through on the north side. They reached the medical bay where Lisa Chang was treating the wounded. I saw it happen on the security monitors. The cadets leaned forward. The footage showed Skreth flooding into the underground chamber. Lisa Chang stood in front of her patients, holding nothing but a medical laser scalpel. She should have run, Vexith said. There was an escape tunnel behind her. She could have survived. But Lisa looked at those Skreth and she screamed something. The audio picked it up. The recording played. Lisa's voice was clear and loud. Not today! She charged them, Vexith continued. A small human woman with a surgical tool charged 8 Skreth warriors. She was going to die. We all knew it. The hologram split screen. On one side, Lisa fighting in the medical bay. On the other side, Alex Price and his squad on the north wall. Alex heard her on the communications channel. He looked at his squad. He did not say anything. He did not need to. The humans on the north wall stopped taking cover. They stopped using tactics. They simply charged. I have heard humans use a word, berserk, Vexith said. It means to fight without thought for safety. To abandon all defense in favor of pure attack. That is what happened. 30 humans went berserk. The footage was brutal. The humans ran toward the medical bay. Not around obstacles, but through them. They shot while running, reloaded without stopping, and when they reached the Skreth, they used their weapons as clubs. Alex Price broke his rifle over a Skreth's head, and then used the broken pieces as stabbing weapons. They reached Lisa in 90 seconds, Vexith said. She was still alive, still fighting. She had killed 1 Skreth and wounded 2 others with her scalpel. Alex and his squad killed the rest. The battle ended shortly after. The remaining Skreth retreated. The outpost was saved. The hologram showed the final count. 43 Skreth survivors out of 2,000. 52 human and Kalith defenders out of 80. Kate Sullivan stood in the ruins of the command center. Vexith continued. She was bleeding from a dozen wounds. Her armor was shattered. But she was checking on every single soldier, human and Kalith alike. She made sure everyone got medical attention. She made sure the wounded were comfortable. She made sure we had food and water. Vexith pulled up a final image. It showed Kate Sullivan sitting against a wall asleep with her weapon still in her hands. Around her were other humans also sleeping in their positions. None of them had left their posts until everyone else was safe. This is what humans become in groups, Vexith said. They are not just individual warriors. They are a pack. Each one fights harder because the others are watching. Each one pushes beyond their limits because they refuse to let their friends down. They do not have our strength or our natural weapons, but they have something more dangerous. They have trust. He looked at the cadets. A Kalith warrior fights for personal honor. We are proud and strong individually, but humans multiply each other's strength. 2 humans are not twice as strong as 1. They are 4 times as strong. 10 humans are not 10 times as strong. They are 100. The auditorium was packed. Word about Commander Vexith's lectures had spread beyond the academy. Military analysts sat in the upper galleries taking notes. Junior officers crowded the doorways. Everyone wanted to understand the humans better. Vexith waited for silence. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the room. For the past 2 days, I have told you about human endurance and human cooperation. Today, I will tell you about human creativity. This is the quality that makes them truly unpredictable. The hologram showed a cargo transport ship, old and battered. This is the civilian vessel Helena's Dream. It carried mining equipment and agricultural supplies. No weapons, no military technology, just a merchant ship with a crew of 15 civilians. The image changed to show reptilian humanoids with heavy armor and plasma rifles. These are Kresh pirates. They boarded Helena's Dream in deep space, planning to take the cargo and sell the crew as slaves. They had done this 100 times before. It always worked. Vexith smiled with his mandibles. It did not work with humans. A new figure appeared in the hologram. A middle-aged human male with gray in his hair and worker's clothes. This is Captain Ben Foster. He was a merchant sailor, not a warrior. He had never been in combat. The Kresh thought he would surrender immediately. The footage showed the Kresh boarding party entering the cargo bay. 12 armed pirates against 15 unarmed civilians. Ben Foster held up his hands and said, "We surrender. The cargo is yours." The creche leader laughed. He told his warriors to start rounding up the crew. Vexith paused. That was when Ben dropped his hands and said one word, "Now." The hologram exploded with action. The cargo containers that the humans had been standing near suddenly activated. Magnetic locks engaged, pinning 4 creche to the metal walls. The gravity plating under another group reversed, sending them floating helplessly to the ceiling. The cargo bay doors began to cycle, threatening to vent the atmosphere. The humans scattered, Vexith continued. They knew their ship. They knew every system, every tool, every hiding place. The creche had superior weapons, but they were in an unfamiliar environment. Ben Foster had turned the entire ship into a weapon. The cadets watched as the human crew fought back with improvised tools. One crew member, a female engineer named Sarah Lewis, used a welding torch as a flamethrower. Another human, a young man named Pete Carson, had rigged the fire suppression system to spray the creche with industrial coolant, freezing their armor joints. Ben Foster himself confronted the creche leader, Vexith said. He had a cargo hook, the kind used to move heavy containers. It was just a metal pole with a hook on the end. The creche leader had a plasma rifle. The footage showed Ben and the pirate facing each other. The creche fired. Ben dove behind a container, and the plasma bolt melted the metal where he had been standing. The pirate advanced, confident. Ben waited, Vexith narrated. He counted the shots. Plasma rifles hold 20 charges. The creche leader fired 17 times, trying to hit Ben through his cover. On the 18th shot, Ben moved. The human rolled out from cover, not away from the pirate, but toward him. The cargo hook swung up, catching the rifle barrel and wrenching it aside. Before the creche could react, Ben drove the hook's point into a gap in the alien's armor. The pirate went down. The entire fight lasted 6 minutes, Vexith said. The humans retook their ship using nothing but maintenance equipment and knowledge of their own vessel. 4 creche died. 8 surrendered. The humans had no casualties. Threxus raised his hand. But Commander, that seems like luck. They used surprise. Once the creche understood what was happening, surely the humans would have lost. That is what I thought, Vexith replied. So let me tell you another story. The hologram changed to show a planet with a green-tinted atmosphere. This is Varus 4. The atmosphere is toxic to most species. Chlorine gas, sulfur compounds, and acidic rain. My people need full environment suits to survive here. So do the Scraith, the Vrexians, and every other species we know. A human appeared on screen. A woman in her 30s with sergeant stripes on her combat armor. This is Sergeant Nina Blake. Her squad was ambushed on Varus 4 during a scouting mission. They were outnumbered and outgunned by a Vrexian patrol. Standard doctrine said to retreat to the dropships and evacuate. Nina Blake looked at the toxic atmosphere and had a different idea. The hologram showed Nina giving orders to her squad. They were removing their helmet seals, exposing themselves to the poisonous air in short bursts. Humans can hold their breath for several minutes, Vexith explained. Their lungs are incredibly efficient. Nina realized that while they needed air, they did not need it constantly. The footage showed the human squad removing their environment suits entirely. They wore only basic combat gear underneath. The Vrexian patrol, safe in their sealed armor, advanced confidently. The humans attacked through the acid rain, Vexith said. The Vrexians could not understand what they were seeing. Creatures moving through an environment that should kill them in seconds. Nina Blake led a charge through a sulfur geyser field. The Vrexians could not follow without risking their suit integrity. The cadets watched as Nina and her squad used the toxic environment as cover and weapon. They led the Vrexians into areas where the acidic rain was strongest, where the ground released chlorine gas, where the very air was a weapon. The humans would hold their breath, strike, and retreat to breathable pockets. The Vrexians lost half their patrol before they retreated, Vexith said. Nina Blake's squad returned to base with minor chemical burns. When asked how she survived, Nina said, Earth's atmosphere used to be poisonous too. We're adapted to handle bad air. A senior officer in the back spoke up. These are impressive tactics, Commander, but they rely on either preparation or unique physiological traits. What about a situation where humans have neither advantage? Vexith nodded. An excellent question. Let me tell you about engineer Chris Tyler. The hologram showed a derelict space station floating in the darkness. This station was a research facility. It was attacked by raiders who wanted the experimental technology inside. The research team evacuated. Chris Tyler, the maintenance engineer, was left behind by accident. The evacuation ships left without realizing he was still aboard. The image showed a human male in his 20s, wearing a stained engineer's jumpsuit. He looked completely ordinary. Chris was alone on the station with no weapons and no communications. The raiders sent a boarding party of 8 warriors to secure the facility. They expected no resistance. Chris Tyler had other plans. The footage showed Chris moving through the station's maintenance tunnels. He was collecting items, seemingly random objects: a plasma coil from a damaged generator, wire from a communications panel, coolant fluid from a refrigeration unit, a broken welding torch. Chris found the raiders on the 2nd level, Vexith continued. He watched them through security cameras. He studied their movement patterns. Then he went to work. The hologram showed Chris building something. His hands moved with practiced ease, connecting components that should not fit together. Within an hour, he had created a crude but functional weapon, part electrical stunner and part plasma caster. But he did not use it immediately, Vexith said. Chris thought several steps ahead. He went to the fusion reactor and began adjusting the containment field. He made it unstable, not enough to cause an explosion, but enough to make the reactor scream warning alarms. The raiders heard the alarms and rushed to the reactor room. Chris was waiting, standing in front of the reactor core with his improvised weapon pointed at the containment field. He told them that if they did not leave immediately, he would rupture the containment and destroy the entire station. Threxus looked skeptical. A bluff. The weapon he built could not have damaged the reactor. Exactly right, Vexith agreed. But the raiders did not know that. Chris had built a convincing prop. He had made the reactor look dangerous. He sold the bluff with confidence. The raiders retreated to their ship and fled. Chris Tyler held off an armed boarding party with spare parts and theater, Vexith said. When rescue teams arrived 3 days later, they found him calmly eating rations in the cafeteria. He had spent the time teaching himself the station's experimental technology from the computer files. The hologram cycled through more images. A human medic who created antibiotics from mold growing in a crashed ship. A human pilot who repaired a faster-than-light drive using parts from a food processor. A human soldier who built a functional communication device from a broken radio and a child's toy. This is the pattern with humans, Vexith explained. They are toolmakers at their core. Every human is trained from childhood to solve problems creatively. They do not see objects for what they are. They see objects for what they could become. He pulled up a split screen showing multiple human innovations. They turned their medical nanites into weapons by programming them to attack enemy biology. They converted mining lasers into defensive turrets. They made explosives from fertilizer and fuel. They are endlessly, terrifyingly creative. But it is not just about weapons, Vexith continued. Humans apply this creativity to strategy as well. They think outside of established patterns. When we say this is how warfare works, humans say, what if we do it differently? Commander Vexith entered the auditorium to find it completely silent. The atmosphere had changed over the past 3 days. The cadets no longer whispered or joked. They sat with notepads and recording devices, treating these lectures as the most important lessons of their military education. Several fleet admirals had joined the senior officers in the back rows. Today I will tell you about the Terran-Vrexian War, Vexith began. It is the most important military conflict in recent history, and the one that taught the galaxy to fear human strategic thinking. The hologram activated, showing 2 star systems connected by trade routes. 8 years ago, the Vrexian Empire decided to expand into human territory. The Vrexians are an old species, proud and technologically advanced. They had never lost a war in their 3,000-year history. Red markers appeared on the map, showing Vrexian fleet positions. The Vrexians had numerical superiority, 600 warships against 300 human vessels. They had better faster-than-light drives, stronger shields, and more powerful weapons. By every military analysis, they should have won in 3 months. Vexith paused. The war lasted 3 years. The Vrexians lost. A human male appeared in the hologram, older, with gray hair and the insignia of an admiral. This is Admiral Henry Cole. He was given command of the human defense fleet. When the Vrexian fleet entered human space, every military advisor told Henry to engage immediately, to use his smaller force in a decisive battle while the Vrexians were still organizing. Henry Cole said no. The tactical map showed the human fleet retreating as the Vrexians advanced. For the first 6 months, Henry refused to fight a major battle. The Vrexians took system after system. They thought they were winning. They did not understand what Henry was doing. Vexith zoomed in on the map. Henry was not retreating. He was trading space for time. Every system the Vrexians took, the humans made them pay for it. Small raids, hit-and-run attacks, mining their supply routes, destroying infrastructure so the Vrexians could not use it. The Vrexians captured territory, but they could not hold it safely. Every supply convoy needed escorts. Every captured station needed guards. Every occupied planet tied up troops. Within 6 months, the Vrexians had conquered 12 systems, but their fleet was spread thin, trying to protect everything they had taken. A female human appeared on screen, wearing civilian clothes but with sharp, intelligent eyes. This is Dr. Sophie Grant. She was a university professor before the war, an expert in xenopsychology. Henry Cole made her a strategic advisor. Sophie studied the Vrexians, Vexith explained. She learned their culture, their history, their way of thinking. She discovered something important. The Vrexians valued honor and direct confrontation. They saw retreat as cowardice. They expected their enemies to fight for every centimeter of space. Sophie told Henry that the Vrexians were culturally incapable of understanding a strategic retreat. They would interpret it as fear, not tactics. This gave the humans an advantage. The map showed more human withdrawals, deeper into their own territory. Henry kept retreating, but each retreat was planned. The humans evacuated civilians ahead of the Vrexian advance. They destroyed anything of military value. They left nothing for the enemy to use. The Vrexians grew frustrated, Vexith continued. They had expected glorious battles and honorable combat. Instead, they got empty planets and endless guerrilla attacks. Their warriors were dying not in grand engagements, but in small ambushes, in supply raids, in accidents with booby traps. A new human appeared, a man with the insignia of a special operations commander. This is Commander Jack Rivera. While Henry fought the strategic war, Jack fought the shadow war. His teams infiltrated Vrexian-held territory. The hologram showed covert operations. Human teams sabotaging Vrexian equipment, destroying supply depots and assassinating key officers. Jack's soldiers did not fight openly. They struck at night from hiding, using tactics the honor-bound Vrexians considered beneath them. But the real genius was not in the attacks themselves, Vexith said. It was in what the attacks did to Vrexian thinking. A female human with intelligence insignia appeared. Lieutenant Maya Perkins. She was Jack's intelligence officer. Maya did not just gather information, she planted it. The hologram showed false documents, fabricated communications, and staged evidence. Maya made the Vrexians believe they had traitors in their ranks. She created fake rebel movements that did not exist. She spread rumors that Vrexian commanders were secretly negotiating with humans. None of it was true, but the Vrexians believed it. Within a year, the Vrexian military was investigating its own officers, Vexith explained. They were executing loyal soldiers for imaginary treason. They were pulling troops from the front lines to search for non-existent human agents. Maya destroyed the Vrexian command structure without firing a shot. The map showed the war entering its second year. The human retreat had stopped. Henry Cole had pulled back to a defensive line that was shorter and easier to defend. The Vrexians had overextended their supply lines by hundreds of light years. They were occupying territory but struggling to maintain it. That was when Henry launched Phase 2 of his strategy. The hologram showed human ships striking at Vrexian logistics. The humans did not attack military targets. They attacked cargo ships, supply depots, and trade stations. Sophie Grant had identified that the Vrexian war effort depended on resources from their core worlds. Cut those supply lines and the war machine would starve. Jack Rivera's Special Forces team struck deeper into Vrexian space, Vexith continued. They did not target soldiers. They targeted infrastructure, power plants, communications arrays, manufacturing facilities. They were destroying the Vrexian economy. A display showed economic data. The cost of the war was rising for the Vrexians. Sophie Grant had calculated exactly how much the Empire could afford to spend. The humans made sure the war cost more than that. Back home in Vrexian space, civilians were suffering, Vexith explained. Food shortages because cargo ships were being destroyed. Power outages because infrastructure was failing. The proud Vrexian Empire was crumbling not from military defeat, but from economic exhaustion. The hologram showed protests on Vrexian worlds. The civilian population began questioning the war. They did not understand why they were sacrificing so much for territory that brought them no benefit. The human strategy was working. They were making the war politically unsustainable. Year 3 began with the Vrexians still holding most of the territory they had taken, Vexith said. But their fleet was exhausted. Their economy was failing, their government was unstable. And Henry Cole had been using those 3 years to build up the human fleet. The map showed new blue markers appearing. Human shipyards had been working non-stop. They had produced 200 new warships. When Henry finally gave the order to attack, he had 500 ships against the Vrexians' 400. The numerical advantage had reversed. The final battle lasted 8 hours. Vexith said quietly. The Vrexians fought with honor and courage, but they were tired, undersupplied, and demoralized. The humans were fresh, well-equipped, and angry. They had been retreating for 3 years. Now they were done retreating. The hologram showed the battle. It was brutal and decisive. The Vrexian Empire sued for peace after losing 2/3 of their fleet. They returned all occupied territory and paid reparations. Their 3,000-year winning streak was over. Vexith deactivated the display. I was an observer during this war. I watched it unfold from a neutral perspective. What terrified me was not the human tactics or technology. It was their patience. He looked at the assembled cadets and officers. Humans are capable of thinking in time scales that other species cannot comprehend. They will lose battles for months or years if it means winning the war. They will sacrifice territory, resources, even lives, if it serves a larger strategy. Henry Cole lost 12 star systems and thousands of soldiers in the first year. Vexith continued. A Calith commander would have been executed for such losses. But Henry knew those losses were temporary. He was playing a longer game. An admiral in the back row stood up. Commander Vexith, are you suggesting that humans are better strategists than other species? No, sir, Vexith replied. I am suggesting that humans think about warfare differently than we do. We think in terms of honor, of winning battles cleanly and directly. Humans think in terms of cost and benefit. They ask, what is the cheapest way to win? And cheap does not always mean lives or resources. Sometimes it means pride. He continued. The Vrexians could have won the war if they had been willing to abandon their occupied territory and consolidate their forces. But their culture would not allow retreat. They had conquered those systems, and honor demanded they keep them. The humans understood this and exploited it. Sophie Grant once told me something, Vexith said. She said, war is not about killing the enemy. It is about making them stop fighting. That is the human philosophy. They do not seek glorious victory. They seek the end of conflict by whatever means necessary. The hologram reactivated, showing post-war footage. Human and Vrexian diplomats signing peace treaties. Reconstruction efforts on damaged worlds. The war ended, but the humans did not seek revenge. The auditorium was full beyond capacity. Cadets sat in the aisles. Officers stood against the walls. Word had spread beyond the academy, beyond the military, beyond even Calith space. Representatives from a dozen alien species had come to hear Commander Vexith's final lecture. They all wanted to understand the humans. Vexith stood in silence for a long moment, looking at the assembled crowd. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, forcing everyone to lean forward to listen. For 4 days I have told you about human warfare, about their endurance, their cooperation, their creativity, and their strategic thinking. Today I will tell you what lies beneath all of these things. Today I will tell you about the human spirit. The hologram activated, showing a small colony world. Green forests, blue oceans, and a single settlement of simple buildings. This is Carson's Ridge, a human colony established 10 years ago. Population 340 civilians. Farmers, teachers, doctors, engineers, families. The image shifted to show a military outpost near the settlement. The colony had a defensive garrison of 40 soldiers. It was supposed to be a peaceful assignment. The colony was in neutral space, far from any conflict zones. Red markers appeared around the planet. 3 years ago, the Zelkan Enclave decided they wanted this world. They sent a military force to claim it. 2,000 Zelkan warriors in advanced combat armor with heavy weapon support. A young female cadet spoke up. "Commander, why did the humans not evacuate? 300 civilians against 2,000 soldiers?" "They were asked to evacuate," Vexith replied. The human military command sent word that ships were coming to extract the civilians. It would take 2 weeks for the ships to arrive. The colony just needed to hold out until then. The hologram showed the human soldiers preparing defensive positions. The military commander was Sergeant Kelly Brooks. She was 32 years old, a veteran of 5 campaigns. She gathered her 40 soldiers and told them the situation. They had to hold for 2 weeks against overwhelming force. A young human male appeared on screen, barely looking old enough to be a soldier. "This is Private Tony Walsh. He was 19 years old." This was his first deployment. When Kelly finished her briefing, Tony raised his hand and asked a simple question. "What about the civilians?" Kelly told him that the civilians would shelter in the underground bunkers while the soldiers fought. Vexith continued. Tony asked another question. "Can they fight if they want to?" The hologram showed a town meeting. The soldiers and civilians gathered together. Kelly explained the situation to the colonists. She told them to stay in the bunkers to stay safe. A civilian stood up, an older man named Paul Bennett. He was a farmer, 60 years old. He said, "Sergeant, this is our home. We would like to help defend it." Vexith's voice grew softer. Kelly tried to refuse. These were not soldiers. They were families, children, elderly people. But Paul pointed out that many of them had hunting rifles. They knew the terrain better than anyone, and they outnumbered the soldiers 7-1. "Kelly Brooks made a decision that still gives me nightmares," Vexith said. She said yes. The map showed defensive positions spreading out from the colony. The soldiers trained the civilians in basic tactics: how to take cover, how to shoot accurately, how to fall back safely. They had 3 days before the Zelkan force arrived. A woman appeared in the hologram. She was in her 40s, wearing teacher's clothes. "This is Linda Hayes. She taught at the colony school. She had never fired a weapon in her life. She spent those 3 days learning how to use a rifle. Not for herself," she said. "For her students." The Zelkan force landed on the 4th day. They expected easy victory, Vexith explained. They had fought human military forces before. They knew humans were dangerous. But these were civilians, farmers and teachers. The Zelkan commander thought it would be over in hours. The battle began at dawn. The hologram showed the first Zelkan assault. Kelly Brooks had positioned her soldiers at key defensive points. The civilians were scattered in secondary positions, providing support fire and supplies. The Zelkan attacked in force, expecting the human line to break immediately. It did not break. The footage showed Tony Walsh at his position, a narrow pass between 2 hills. He was alone except for 2 civilians, Paul Bennett and a young woman named Amy Clark. Tony's position was critical. If the Zelkan broke through there, they could flank the entire human defense. He had to hold. Tony held for 18 hours straight, Vexith said. Paul and Amy brought him ammunition and water. When Tony's hands started shaking from exhaustion, Paul took his rifle and covered him while he rested for 10 minutes. Then Tony was back up firing again. The map showed the battle spreading across multiple positions. Everywhere the same pattern repeated. Soldiers and civilians fighting side by side. Linda Hayes ran ammunition to the front lines while enemy fire exploded around her. She was not a soldier, but she was brave. When a soldier fell wounded, Linda dragged him to cover. Vexith pulled up medical records. Kelly Brooks was hit on the 2nd day. Shrapnel from an explosion. The wound was severe. The medic told her she needed to evacuate to the medical center. Kelly refused. She continued commanding from a stretcher, directing the defense while bleeding. The battle raged for 8 days. The hologram showed the shrinking human positions, the rising casualty counts. The Zelkan expected the humans to surrender. They had lost over half their soldiers. The civilians were exhausted and terrified. Any other species would have given up. The humans did not give up. On day 9, Paul Bennett's position was overrun. Vexith said quietly. He was out of ammunition. The Zelkan warriors closed in. Paul could have run. There was an escape route behind him. Instead, he stood up with a shovel, the only weapon he had left, and charged them. The footage showed the old farmer running at armored warriors with a farming tool. Paul Bennett died buying 30 seconds for other humans to fall back safely. He was a farmer. He had no military training, but he was human, and humans do not abandon their friends. The hologram showed Kelly Brooks in her final hours. She was pale, weak from blood loss. The medic begged her to rest, to accept treatment. Kelly refused the pain medication. She said other people needed it more. She kept commanding, kept fighting, even as her body was failing. On day 10, Kelly's position was about to be overrun. Vexith continued. She had 6 soldiers left and a dozen civilians. They were surrounded. The Zelkin commander offered surrender. Terms were generous. They would spare the civilians. They just wanted the world. Kelly looked at the people around her. Tony Walsh, barely more than a boy. Linda Hayes, the teacher who had become a warrior. The farmers and engineers and parents who had chosen to fight. She keyed her radio to broadcast to the entire colony. Vexith played the recording. Kelly's voice was weak but steady. We have held for 10 days. The relief fleet arrives in 4 more days. We can make it. We will make it. This is our home. We do not surrender our homes. The room was completely silent. The civilians cheered, Vexith said. These terrified, exhausted people cheered because their leader believed in them, because they believed in each other. The battle entered its final days. Tony Walsh's position fell on day 12. He had been fighting for nearly 2 weeks with almost no sleep. When the Zelkin finally overran his position, they found him still conscious, still trying to reload his weapon. They took him prisoner and later said they had never seen such determination. Linda Hayes was hit on day 13, Vexith continued. She had run ammunition between positions for 13 days straight, never stopping, never resting. When shrapnel caught her, she fell in the middle of an open field. 2 soldiers ran out under fire to drag her to safety. They said they owed her their lives. She had kept them supplied through the entire battle. The hologram showed the night of day 13. Kelly Brooks died that night, Vexith said softly. She had been wounded for 11 days. She had refused treatment so others could have supplies. She gave her final orders, told her soldiers she was proud of them, and closed her eyes. The soldiers wanted to quit then, to surrender. They had lost their commander. They had lost more than half their people. The relief fleet was still a day away. It would have been logical to give up. But they did not give up. A civilian took command, Vexith explained. A young man named Ryan Cooper who worked at the power plant. He was not a soldier. He had no authority, but he stood up and said, Kelly told us we would make it. So we make it. The final day of the battle was the hardest. The humans had less than 50 fighters left, soldiers and civilians together. They held 7 different positions. The Zelkin threw everything they had at those positions, trying to break through before the human fleet arrived. The hologram showed Tony Walsh being rescued by the relief force. When the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel, they launched immediately. Marines hit the ground running. They found the colony still standing. 38 of the original 40 soldiers were dead or wounded. 89 civilians were casualties. But they had held. Vexith deactivated the hologram. The room remained silent. When he spoke again, his voice carried to every corner of the auditorium. You have asked me all week why humans are terrifying in warfare. I have shown you their tactics, their technology, their strategies. But none of that